Welcome to Stop the Violence Prayer Chain Foundation talk show, The Naked Truth. This evening, we're going to have some special guests. We will allow them to introduce themselves. Right now, we'll have the hosts introduce themselves that will be answering the questions.
Hi, good evening. My name is Velda Jones Potter, and I'm really excited to be here for this evening with The Naked Truth. And along with me is my co-host.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carmen Wanamaker, and I'm excited being here. Our first time doing The Naked Truth.
And with us also this evening, we have a very, very special guest. And we will ask him to introduce himself, if you will, please.
My name is Willis Phelps Jr. I'm an old dude from this area, and some say I'm a master storyteller, so we'll see what happens.
And who do you have with you?
Sorry?
Who do you have with you?
Oh, well, that's it. I have here, this is my right hand, and my left hand, my wife, Patricia Phelps. This is my wife, and she's here to keep me in line. And on my left side is my daughter, Phyllis Davis, or Phyllis Phelps Davis, we'll put that in. And she is my soul person. She keeps me in church.
Praise God.
Well, we're really happy to have you here with us, all three of you. And Mr. Phelps, we're extremely happy to have you here because of the history that you have in our community. Would you start by maybe sharing a little bit about your history, where you grew up, and what things were like?
Well, I'm quite sure you can understand me. I don't really like this. I'm talking, I talk a lot. But I was actually born in South Carolina, and I came to Delaware when I was 3 years old. And that's where everything continued. When I tell my older folks, and I used to be 79, when I tell my older folks the things that I remember, like riding a billy goat when I was 3, being chased by a bull when I was 3, they look at me and they say, "But you was only 3 years old." I said, "I just told you about it though, didn't I?" They scratch their heads. But I came here when I was 3 years old, and growing up in Delaware, especially Wilmington, was just, it was an adventure, and it was a challenge early on. We're talking about civil rights, things you can't do, places you couldn't go. And I was there at all those places. I remember going into places that said, no Irish or black folks. And that's a nice word. I said black folks.
Yes.
I remember sitting at end of a counter in a place like a drugstore or a restaurant, and that was my space over there, and over there everybody else got waited on, sat and ate their meal. I had to get my meal and go out the door with it. Grew up with that. But Wilmington is, in Delaware, it's one of the largest cities, and anything that happened during the course of those years, any place, happened here in Wilmington. And I've had wonderful memories, even the hard times. And you think back on it, and I look around now, sadly, some of those things are gone. The buildings, the people, but I've got it here. I've got things written down, and what I do, I'm used to having an audience,
Yeah.
but it's interactive, and we're not, able to do that as much now with this monster that we're dealing with. but coming from South Carolina, off of a plantation.
Oh, wow.
I come off a place called the Hayes Plantation. And I know stories about my grandparents, how they lived there, the things they had to deal with. And I'll tell you, you can make a theatrical movie, an epic movie, with the stories in their lives. And I'm so happy to be able to share some of that with you, talking about myself.
Mr. Phelps, going to school in Delaware as a young boy, what was that like? What school did you go to, and what was it like in your school?
Looking back, the schools that I started in, and you're in an area now where they used to be, Millside Elementary, long gone. But going to school, we started in Millside Elementary School, and as we went through the grades, we ended up graduating and going to Dunleaf School. Well, Dunleaf is still here, right there on Rogers Road. And I remember actually marching from our Millside school, going to our new modern school, which is Dunleaf. Going to school, talking about segregation, it's all black school. I'm trying to think about it, I can't remember when we ended up with the integrated school, but it was in Wilmington. We had what is now called Bancroft School. And they integrated that school. We ended up, I left there at 16. I made it to the 12th grade. We had the ceremony and everything, and I was supposed to go to the 12th grade. I left the school, went to talk to a recruiter, and I joined the Army.
Oh, wow.
That was 1956,
Wow.
and I was only 16.
Wow.
And one of our icons, Dr. Lewis L. Redding, agreed with my mother, and he told a little tale and said he's old enough, and he signed off on the document.
Wow.
And I left Wilmington at the age of 16. And went off to be a soldier.
Wow.
Looking at what's here now, there's so much missing. Their history, I mean, you're on sacred ground right here in this
Yes.
area.
Yes.
And
I said that.
I spent the first few years in the military in an all-black unit. We had white officers. A couple of our NCOs were African Americans as far as people being in charge. But on my left, my right, my rear to the front were people of color. And that lasted for a few years. That's a story in itself. When you look at the units, if I say 141st Ordnance Company, everybody's looking, what's he talking about? We had the 736, we had the 262, but we don't know anything about a black unit. But we were there, we existed, and I'm in the process now of bringing that to the forefront. Hopefully we'll be able to tell that story to everyone.
Okay, when you say sacred grounds, now this used to be what, an army barracks, and that we're on here, Millside used to be an army barracks, and I was told that Harriet Tubman came through the same area.
There's so many parts of our history that was touched, including this area. Millside itself was built for African Americans. The buildings, look, they were, if you picture army barracks made out of wood and concrete. On the north side of Hill Street here, there was a place, the buildings were apartments, 2- and 3-story apartments. They set off by themselves, and the doors were all blue. We call that the blue front. You can only see it now if you go down, or visualize it, I should say. If you go down Hill Street, heading into Wilmington, it would be on your left-hand side. All you have it now is high hills and dirt, concrete, and then the industrial complex there. Going down Hill Street on the right-hand side, you have Dutchess Pond, which we used to swim in, ice skate. That's still there, but going deeper and then coming up out of the water on the, I'll say the left side, and actually the eastbound lane of Rogers Road, what you see in there now is industrial complexes, and you'd have to look real hard to even visualize there being homes. Again, wood, concrete. One thing that stands there that is like, I'll call it a monument to those times. There's a gas station that has been closed for years, and the fact that it was operational is given to you because of the truck, a panel truck's parked there, and it's been parked there for ages. And it was part of that family that had the gas station, and the Norwoods, long gone, but that's the only thing left of Millside that you can put your hands on. So, it was growing up and having friends who went to school with you, who would greet you sometimes and look at you and say, "Hey, Phelps, how you doing? You still playing Cowboys and Indians?" And it would bring back memories, and we'd talk. And it seems like what I've done over the years is continued that. I was telling them about Harriet Tubman, who they knew some about, but the rest of the stories, I call it, they had no clue to how she really came through here. You tell them about her on a bridge going into Wilmington with people on a coach covered up with hay and blankets, taking them on the Freedom. And they look at you like, but it happened, it was real. It wasn't a movie, it wasn't make-believe. Bancroft School, Howard High. There was a couple others, and I can't get them in my head right now because I talk too much. But if you have any idea, England, we got the education.
Oh, yes.
The teachers, Mr. Boyd, names I should have wrote them all down.
Yeah, I went to Bancroft and Howard myself.
Right.
Yeah, I remember Mr. Harris, Miss Coleman,
Yeah, Miss
you know,
Coleman,
Miss
yes,
Coleman,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
Mr. Rice. I mean,
Mr. Rice,
yeah, Dr. Christoph was at Howard, and
Wow.
yeah, Mr. Carmichael ended up being principal at Bancroft at that time.
Oh, right.
Remember,
right.
Mr. Carmichael used to be our art teacher, and yeah.
What is
they
it
gave us-
about those people, those teachers? What is it about them that made them so special? That you remember their names, that I see your eyes light up. What is it about them that was so special?
Well, they were, number one, family. But you were a child growing up, and you had your place.
Yes,
You knew when to speak,
yes.
when not to speak, and when you got out of line, they had ways to get you back in line.
Oh, yes, they did.
Sometimes it hurt.
Yeah.
You know,
But it was good for you, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
you show them today if you show someone a paddle,
Yes.
they accuse you of child abuse
Yes.
Yeah.
because they use that on us.
Yes, they
And of
did.
course, the natural things grew outside. The willow tree with the willow branch,
Mm-hmm.
the oak tree with the oak tree branch. Those things were part of our life, part of our growing up, and part of the discipline that got us to the point where we knew when to say yes, sir,
Yes.
no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And if there was a conversation going on between grown-ups, you knew where you were in that conversation. They were over there, and you was over here.
Yes.
They were great teachers who shared not only the way life was in the world, the way it was going to be as we grew up, but how we would survive if we remembered that we were family and friends.
Yes.
Just, I think about the ones that corrected me when I wasn't home, and I'd get home, if I did something wrong, it was like my mother or an auntie or a cousin would say, "Why did you do that over?" They knew about it before I got home.
Exactly.
You talk about communicating, and sometimes you just
Yes.
say to yourself, "You better be careful who I'm hanging out with and what I'm doing." But family was it. That's how we survived and got to where we were, how we became policemen, industrial workers, doctors and nurses,
Yes.
Yes.
servants. That's how we
Praise God.
made our area, made the neighborhood what it was when you look at the good things,
Yes.
and sometimes what it was when you look at the bad things.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
May I ask your age? May I ask your age, Mr. Phelps?
I'm sorry,
Your age.
my age?
Yes.
How old are you?
Oh,
How young?
yes.
How young are you?
Well, you know, I was going, this was a couple of years ago. I was going to buy me a t-shirt because I liked the way it sounded. I was going to get a t-shirt that had on it, in small letters, over the pocket, 79. And on the back of it, it would say, "I used to be 79. Today, I've been blessed. When I look back on the years, it seems like I'm not getting to that next step, but I'm 83.
All right.
Wonderful.
Praise God.
Yes.
Praise
And I look
God.
at it, I was born in 1938,
Mm-hmm.
in July 14th, 1938.
Yeah. One
Okay.
day after my mother.
Oh.
Same year, one day.
One day after your mother?
Yes.
Yes.
And how special it is
I
to
know.
have that longevity. What a blessing.
Yes. And to have such an excellent memory.
Yes.
You have a
Yes.
memory
Oh, my
that
goodness.
is at 83. That's
Yes.
really a
Phenomenal.
blessing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
the memory's not so bad, but if you ask my wife, and sometimes my daughter, they'll tell you, he can't hear. He can't
How
hear.
about this? Maybe you have selective hearing. Mrs. Phelps, do you have something to say? What about his hearing? Does he have selective hearing or what?
Very selective.
Very selective hearing. Let's go to the daughter.
Yeah, I think it's selective.
Isn't it a blessing to still
Yes.
have your father?
It is. It
Yes, it
really
is.
is. It really is.
Yes.
I'm sitting here and trying to visualize the community as it was. And you know, we had some folks in our community that if I call a name to you, you say, "Oh, really?" Judy Johnson,
Oh,
Oh.
really?
Really?
baseball player.
Yes.
Yes.
Judy and those men from the Negro League in this area, I got to see Satchel Paige up close, and some of the other members.
Wow.
But Judy, growing up and being in the league and doing what he did in the neighborhood, as he became famous, if you will, and renowned, known.
Yeah.
Yes.
When he retired, he came back to the neighborhood,
Mm.
and right there in our community center, Millside, the shopping center, Seymour store there, Judy Johnson had a item store. You call it a little, just a small grocery store, even though we had a big grocery store in the center, the shopping center. His store was in between the beauty parlor, I don't remember the owner's name, but Judy's store was in between the beauty parlor and Copeland, Mr. Copeland's barber shop. Copeland still has family members in Dunleaf here. I can't remember his passing, but he was quite well known, the barber shop there. And I remember going into Judy's store, and the one thing that we would do is go in there to get comic books and candy. The penny candy and the nickel and dimes. Well, we also had a habit, even though we spent money there, we take what wasn't ours, comic books.
Yeah.
Well, one day he called us to the store, we had paid for the comic books, and he gave us what for. He didn't call the parents, he didn't call the police. He told us that was it, never again. And from that day on, we went in and we never took anything that wasn't ours or didn't pay for it. His store in our community in Millside lasted until he left the neighborhood, and the next place he went was on the west side of Wilmington. They named the park after him,
Yes.
and his store was right there across the street from the park. And I remember going there until he left Clayton Street, 3rd and Clayton, across from the park.
Wow.
When he closed that store, Judy was gone, but I remember, just like it was yesterday,
Wow.
That's amazing.
he was family, really.
That's amazing because that park is there, 3rd and Clayton.
Yeah.
And so we know that he was famous. We know he made a mark. But to meet someone who knew him and knew him personally and who was in some ways raised by him as part of his village, and to hear how instead of calling the police
Yeah.
and doing something that would set you young
Yes.
men, young boys on a path for a criminal record and everything that goes with that, he chose to teach you,
And
Yes.
that's what he did.
to teach you.
Yeah.
And he was family to everybody in the neighborhood. I can't think of anything on a detrimental side or negative during that time that he was there and here. Sadly, I don't know where any of his family is now, but that won't be hard to just find out because you can do all this online now or whatever.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
out. And you got me thinking about that. I'm going to do that. But the community itself, you look at what was there, there's so much to tell about it, so much to tell.
Yes.
Mr. Phil, I would like to ask you, what would you like to say to our young children today?
Our young kids today,
Yeah, what are some encouragement would you like to?
one thing is to not be self-centered and not be afraid. Look beyond where you are. If you're in high school, look at the opportunities and take the opportunities to go to college.
Yeah.
If you're in college, look at the type of education that will not only give you security and lift you up, but will also mold the community and bring the community and keep it up. We're not in bondage as far as chains go anymore, but we still have to deal with breaking the bondage of our mindset.
Yes.
We can do anything, go anywheres. Being a policeman is right there in the neighborhood. But we can actually look beyond the earth. Beyond the earth, we can be astronauts. It's proven they're there. And what we have to take in and really celebrate is when you look at that person that's flying that airplane or that rocket ship or reaching for the other planets. You don't say he as much as you used to. It's she. She is the astronaut. She is the pilot. She is the designer, the inventor. And we have to look at her and honor her roots and how she has laid that foundation for her sisters, her nieces, her cousins, her aunts. She is right there with he. And that's how we are as family. That's how we are as family.
Yes.
Mr. Phelps, thank you so very much. The message that you have given us today and that all the young people who get to share this conversation with is so powerful. And we honor you and appreciate you for all that you did in building this community that we enjoy and we live in. And we thank your wife and your daughter for being here and supporting you and sharing you with us.
Yes.
So we thank you.
I look at all the pictures on the wall and it just tells me there it is. We have a story here and a story there, and this is what our young folks need to see right in front of them. And they'll look at it and they may ask you a question or you a question, and they get the rest of the story and be inspired.
Yes.
I thank you so much for having me here. As you see, I talk a lot.
That's okay.
Oh, no, that's what we need.
It's all good information.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. And then hopefully we'll be able to come back when our children are here.
Yes.
Maybe next month for Black History Month.
Oh, yes.
And set in the activity room with the children and go over some things with them. I'm sure they have tons of questions about their history.
Well, you see me kind of looking there, and I said, I'm going to be here. But please,
Yes.
I'd love to come back, and there's different stories, a lot of our history
Yes.
and world history. I
Yes.
thank you so much for
And we thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you so
Mrs.
much.
Phelps. Thank you,
Thank you.
Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. God bless you all.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining us this evening.